It is 7 o'clock. Good to see you this morning. A winter flu warning. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer said we should prepare for a big surge in flu cases. Medical experts are warning that hospital admissions from coronavirus, flu and other respiratory illnesses could double compared to a normal year. But there is some good news. Travel agents are expecting a large increase in half-term bookings after the number of countries on the red list were slashed and requirements for testing change. We'll be discussing all of that with the man in the know, the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, joining me in just a few minutes' time. But also this morning, how to manage your daily demons through exercise. The former rugby league professional Jamie Acton will be joining me to tell us all about his new fitness app, which tracks your mental well-being. But then a little later, the strange world of becoming famous during lockdown. At 9:45, I'll be speaking to the winner of the 2020 Bake Off, Peter Sawkins, and I'll be asking him for a couple of his best cooking hacks. It is Friday, the 8th of October. Grab another jab. The biggest ever flu vaccine campaign begins as health chiefs warn that hospital admissions and deaths from flu could double this winter. Travel takeoff. The government cuts testing requirements and slashes the red list to just 7 countries. A winter of discontent. Citizens' Advice warns that calls to their helpline have increased by a third as benefits are cut and the cost of living rises.
It's hard work living on a poverty. You know what I mean? And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty. I was poor before the pandemic. Nothing's changed.
They've got the money in the bank, but human rights campaigners criticise the takeover of Newcastle United by Saudi Arabian investors.
But the shoes are back, the wedding ring is back, and I'm back in the good books.
Let's go! Return of the ring. British tennis legend Andy Murray is reunited with his wedding band and his smelly trainers after they both went missing in California. As for the weather, it's going to be warm for many of us today after a very mild start in some places, but the murky north and the west will have some rain. Morning all. Senior health officials are warning that there could be a surge in the number of flu cases this winter. There are worries that this year will be much worse, with the majority of COVID restrictions being eased. Sky's Shingi Marariki has our first report.
Vaccines. Never have they been talked about more. But how can they help keep us safe in the coming months?
Before winter begins to bite, these medics are urging people to come forward for a vaccination we haven't spoken about as much this year, the flu jab. In a campaign that launches today, people are being encouraged to book their injection as soon as possible to protect themselves and their loved ones. Modelling suggests hospital admissions and deaths caused by seasonal flu could be 2 times that of a normal year. The combination of rising COVID cases, lower immunity against the flu after a year of social distancing, and indoor socialising for the festive period could prove catastrophic for the NHS. That is why GPs like Dr. Sarah Jarvis are encouraging not just the immunocompromised, but people young and old to get a shot.
People are congregating. They're not socially distancing in the way they were last year, which meant that there was virtually no flu to add to winter pressure. The NHS always comes under huge pressure in winter. This year, we may well have high cases of flu. We're adding COVID into the mix, and we've got a huge backlog of people, far more people than usual, needing care because they didn't have it during the first and second waves when hospitals were closed to anybody who didn't have COVID.
But who exactly can act on this call to action? The flu vaccine is being offered to those over 50, pregnant, those with health conditions, residential care, frontline health, social care workers, carers, and those who live with someone who is vulnerable. One concern to address in the coming months is the hesitancy which we've seen curb COVID jab take-up among minorities.
So you need the government and the public health messaging to go into those communities more and talk to people in their community. Because we're a sort of a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-dimensional society, you have to address all those different groups in different ways.
The store, supply and rollout of COVID jabs has been vital this year, saving thousands of lives. Now, as the temperature plummets, people are being asked to take another injection in the hope of saving thousands more. Shingi Marike, Sky News.
Pleased to say the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, joins us once again on the programme. Mr Shapps, very good morning.
Morning.
As always seems to happen when you appear on the show, I have a list of questions on your brief as long as my arm, but I hope we can start just briefly on that which we are hearing. The flu vaccination programme. Clearly, there are a lot of concerns about the pressures that could be brought to bear on the health service, given restrictions are pretty much gone, COVID is in the community, and flu will be increasing. Just how bad do we think things could get?
I think it's extremely important that people get their flu vaccination. In previous years, we will have heard these messages pre-COVID, and some people have thought, well, I'm usually fine with these things. This year is different, as your report suggested. You've had people not building up any immunity because last year we were all split apart so much because of COVID. And then obviously the twin threats of both COVID and flu means that this year getting your flu jab, if you're in any one of the many different categories you showed there, all over 50s, vulnerable people, people who live with vulnerable people, just go and get the flu jab done. You can probably get it at the same time or similar time to doing the booster jab for people for COVID as well.
Some of those involved in the health service are suggesting we could see deaths from flu rising as high as 60,000.
Well, look, I'm not an epidemiologist, even though we've all become armchair ones through the COVID crisis. But we know the dangers of flu. It's not new. There's pressures on the health service every single year through the winter months due to flu. And yes, last year was really just an exception to that because of people staying at home. So, but we can all do something about it. And of course, the flu vaccine is that thing. When you get the call, please go and get the jab, as has been so familiar with COVID, but now for flu as well.
Well, let's both take off our amateur epidemiologist hats and move directly on to your brief. And, of course, a big announcement yesterday in terms of travel around the world. Just 7 countries now left on the red list. Some people are suggesting, however, that we should still be concerned about the possibility of variants coming into this country and perhaps seeding. Is that not a major concern of the government anymore?
Well, you're right. So it's a major step forward, really, the travel industry, which has been into this crisis first, out last in many ways, has suffered hugely. That's a lot of jobs on the line, etc. When it comes to the safety aspect of it, we are still requiring a test. We're going to move that down from being a PCR test, the expensive ones that you have to send away to a lab, to a lateral flow test. So that will help. And it will enable us to monitor things. And actually, reassuringly, if you come back from somewhere, you do a lateral flow, you get a positive, then you'll be able to get a free NHS PCR test in the normal way and you're back into the normal system. But the big difference, of course, now is we're vaccinated. And if we're having this conversation this time last year, no one was vaccinated. And that really makes the change there.
Just in terms, though, of the testing and the move from PCR to lateral flow, can you give us a date on when we might know this? Of course, half-term is fast approaching. There are plenty of people who might not be able to afford to get away for a break if we're talking about a requirement for a PCR rather than a lateral flow test.
Yeah, that's right. We want to get this done for half-term for people. I know my colleagues over at Health and to a certain extent the Home Office, they're the people who have to implement this change, are working extremely hard on getting this done. And so we anticipate having it ready for the half-term. And what a difference it will make for people rather than having to do things like send off the test and wait for the result, as people will be familiar with a lateral flow. You read it on the cassette there and then. It shows your result within a few minutes, and much easier, much less expensive as well.
Just very briefly, when might we expect that announcement then?
In the coming days, we know when obviously the half term's coming up, and my advice to people would be just to hold off. You will need to book make sure that you've got a lateral flow test booked, and you'll put the reference number on your passenger locator form before you come home. Of course, you can fill that out whilst you're abroad in most cases. And of course, another simplification is, and this has already happened, you no longer need to take a test before you depart, wherever you're coming back from, Spain or wherever you happen to be, back to the UK, you no longer need to seek a test before you come here. So that's a major simplification. Of course, the big one we're waiting for in November, this won't be for half term, I'm afraid, but the US have said that they'll reopen to British visitors as well. And of course, that's a very major air route, the busiest in the world.
Do we have a specific date on that just yet, Transport Secretary?
I don't. I've been speaking to my opposite number. I spoke to the American ambassador a couple of days ago. They're still working through the technicalities of that. They've said November to us, and obviously we're working very closely with them because we would like to see that done so families can reunite, businesses can get together, and people can go travelling again. So we think it's certainly well due. We're allowing Americans here. We're recognising their vaccines, and I should mention in this big change that we're making today, another 37 countries are also being recognised by the United Kingdom for their vaccination programmes. So those people will be able to follow the new rules, which is just a simple lateral flow on day 2.
To move to slightly more domestic matters, in terms of the shortages that we have seen at petrol pumps, the Petrol Retailers Association have accused the government of not having the ability nor the capacity to command and control the crisis. We're 15 days in now to shortages at the pumps. Can we put an end date? When are we going to be out of this situation? I understand it's different in different parts of the country, but it's still pretty bleak down in this part of it.
Yes, I mean, government doesn't have the ability to control I mean, they're right. We don't have a command and control system over our petrol fuel supplies, and that's probably a good thing. What we do know is that in most parts of the country, I was up in Manchester, the Midlands last week. This has ended now. If you're in London or the South East, those are the only two the areas where we're seeing any continued problems. But even there, we are starting to see the supplies come through. I know the Army are plugging the gaps. And just as an interesting statistic, actually, compared with the low point about 8 or 9, 10 days ago, and now there's twice as much petrol in the forecourts, underground in the forecourts, than there was then.
Everything like back to normal by this time next week, you think?
Yeah, I think we're right at the tail end of this now. And just again, I just repeat, there was never actually a shortage of fuel in the country, in the refineries, in the storage centres. If somebody says go out and buy, which is what the story we saw, then queues are inevitable. There's almost nothing a government can do to stop that from happening. We saw it with toilet paper.
Well, I think the Petrol Retailers Association would disagree with you on that one. I mean, they would suggest that there have been people in the industry warning about this problem coming down the pipeline for quite some time. Just in terms of the reason that we're in this situation, and of course it is, a shortage of drivers. Currently there's a backlog, I believe, of around about 54,000 HGV licences to process. The situation's been exacerbated by strike action, of course. What are we doing to address that backlog? And, those HGV licences would pretty much sort the problem out.
Yeah, let me just actually nail this entirely for you. There are not 54,000 people waiting licences. There's 3,500 people who have very recently, within the last week, applied for provisional HGV licences. All of the rest, so 52-odd thousand, are people who have put in for renewals, perhaps address changes. The rules are very clear. You don't stop driving for those reasons. So if you happen to be an HGV driver, you're watching this, and you've said that you've moved address, for example, so you're one of those 50,000. It's not a problem. You can carry on driving. They will be returned to you in time. They're processing mid-July right now, as you say, because of the unnecessary strikes that were taking place during COVID at DVLA. It does not stop you from driving. So this is not the reason for the problem. And actually, if you want to become an HGV driver, be very welcome. The salaries have obviously become a lot more attractive now, much more competitive. You'll actually, if you apply for your provisional license, find that turned around within 4 or 5 days. So, but please do apply. We're looking for HGV drivers in this country, of course, as is the case worldwide.
Another topic we need to dwell on. There have been hints that there may well be changes to HS2 coming down the pipeline, perhaps getting rid of part of the line going north, or prioritising the kind of the east to west line. What is the truth of all of this, and when might we get a definitive answer? Every day that goes past where we're kind of in this limbo position, someone somewhere is going to be losing money.
So very simply, of course, we're building HS2 on the west coast side. We want to make sure we get the benefits of high-speed trains. extra capacity, really, from Birmingham to Leeds as well. And that means that, given that these plans were first hatched 15, 20 years ago even, a lot has happened in the meantime, including Northern Powerhouse.
Yeah, including the Conservatives getting elected in 2010. Minister, this has been on Conservative desks for more than a decade.
Yeah, I mean, this is a multi-decade project, of course. And all I was going to say is Northern Powerhouse Rail, that's the plan to link up lots of northern cities by rail. Midlands Hub, that's the plan to link up Western Midlands, East Midlands. So we just want to make sure it's all properly integrated together. There's no point ploughing on with a plan invented in a different time and delivered very, very slowly. So if anything, what we want to do is speed up these benefits and find better ways to do it and connect.
Tell me when we're going to find out about this then, Minister.
Yes, I was going to say timing-wise, obviously we've got the spending review coming up. That is a big moment where the government sets out its plans, in this case for the rest of the Parliament. I think it's due on the 27th of October, to give you a precise date. So not long to wait until we're able to put all of this into context.
I'm just having a quick look over your shoulders, and I can't see a Newcastle United emblem anywhere there. I don't know if you're a fan, but what do you make of the takeover of the club? I understand that many people dislike Mike Ashley, but Mohammed bin Salman, and his involvement in the death of Jamal Khashoggi, which our intelligence services certainly seem to believe is the case, does mean that we have some very unsavoury people coming in and taking over one of the biggest football clubs in the country. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I mean, there's a very clear test, actually. It was called the Owners and Directors Test for football clubs and for the Premier League, which they have to satisfy before anybody can invest in, take over a club.
Yeah, I mean, they're not human rights experts, though, are they?
No, they're not. Of course, look, the Premier League will need to, and has assessed this. The Owners and Directors Test is the key thing. And the point I was going to make is that Tracy Crouch, who is an excellent MP, was a sports minister, is actually carrying out a review into this whole issue of finance, ownership, and the rest. Of course, if people pass that test, as the rules and the law stands, people are entitled to invest in clubs. My understanding in this case is there's been a complete separation between the country and the business that's involved, so that there's no direct control. I have to confess, you're not on my area of complete expertise, but I do know that the Owners and Directors Test has to have been passed. Otherwise, this could not have taken over. And I did note the fans seemed pretty pleased about it when I saw them celebrating on the TV last night.
They certainly did. Yeah, I don't know whether that was just the announcement or the fact we're getting closer to the weekend. Grant Shapps, good to see you this morning. Certainly got through a few questions there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, still to come on the programme this morning, fears of a growing diplomatic row between France and Britain over fishing rights. At 12:30, I'll be talking to the chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Fisheries. 8:05, I'll be speaking to the South African High Commissioner and Dame Irene Hayes from Hayes Travel as those restrictions are eased. And at 12:30, we're just mentioning it there, a deal to make Newcastle United one of the world's richest football clubs. I'll be speaking to sports lawyer Trevor Watkins about what the Saudi Arabian takeover could mean. Citizens Advice say that calls to their helpline have risen by a third as the cost of living rises and benefits are cut. Sky News is following the lives of 3 families who all face a difficult winter ahead. Let's bring in our People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin, who joins us now. Nick, just tell us a little bit about the reporting you've been doing, the families that you've been following.
Yeah, good morning, Neil. A few months ago, we saw to try and spend a little bit of time inside factors that are swirling around the family we're having on people, and it's culminated in a report. And today, and when you look at the impact that rising energy costs, rising fuel costs, rising food costs, rent and things like that have on families, it really is quite a shocking thing. And we spent time with families, a couple called Jackie and Jason in Buxton, another couple called Robert and Laura, and a single mum, Helen, who works part-time as a postie. And they are all absolutely struggling. The bills are stacking up around them. And today's piece starts with Jackie, who's been working just before the pandemic. She lost her job just as it started. She was nursing her mum, who was very ill, and now things have really started to fall apart. And this is what Jackie had to say when I stood in her kitchen the other day, and really things weren't going very well for her at all.
It's hard work, living on a poverty. You know what I mean? And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty. I was poor before the pandemic. Nothing's changed. Nothing's going to change. That is exactly how I feel, and Boris Johnson just doesn't help. I can't even watch the news and listen to him anymore. It's absolutely soul-destroying. And then he's going on again today about a higher wage, and where is it? It's going to take a few years. We're still going to be on the breadline, earning nothing and living on nothing, just paying your bills.
We will have lost Nick there. So we will thank him. Well, he can't hear me, but we are very grateful. You can watch Nick's full special report, Struggling Britain. That's at 11:30 this morning, and then throughout the day here on Sky News. Some of the day's other stories now. And a leading environmental group says the government will miss its target of net zero on greenhouse gases by the year 2050. The WWF claims that plans will fail unless tougher restrictions are imposed on big businesses. Well, climate experts say there is a lack of racial diversity in climate change decision-making. The University of Bristol says men of colour made up 5% of contributions at local net zero meetings, while women of colour accounted for just 2%, despite making up 16% of Bristol's population. As we always do, let's take a quick look at the impact of the climate on the planet. Interesting up at the top there. That top line shows how our power is being generated. It's been running at 25%, 30%. It's up to 58% from fossil fuels this morning. Then you have the rise in global temperature since records began. The line beneath that, the time we think it will take to get to a global rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius, seen by many as the point of no return for the planet. And then you have total CO2 emissions in millions of tonnes. There have been some, well, very different reactions to the takeover at Newcastle United by Saudi Arabian investors. While fans celebrated outside the ground, the deal was condemned by the fiancé of Jamal Khashoggi, the man whose murder American officials say was ordered by a senior Saudi Arabian prince. Sky's sports correspondent Tom Parmenter reports.
They haven't won a game in the Premier League this season, but Newcastle United now have the victory they've craved.
I've always questioned whether I would see them win anything in my lifetime, but now I've got belief.
It just means the world. Football is this city, simple as.
Oh, unbelievable, best day of my life. Better than me Ben being born, to be fair. Wonderful.
It's not the money we care about, it's the ambition. We want something to look forward to, you know what I mean? We want a team that tries.
They had that in the 90s when the goals flowed, the team sparkled, and they all loved it. But then came Mike Ashley, who managed to suck the joy away from this club. Finally, they can say that the Mike Ashley era at Newcastle is over. That's why they're here, but also to try and take in what comes next. Huge investment dominated by money from Saudi Arabia. It puts them on a footing with the richest clubs on the planet.
I wasn't even alive when we were challenging for the Champions League. When we were last in the Europa League, I was only 6. And I just wanted some of them times to myself. And I just want the club to be something I can support, I believe in.
The Premier League say they are satisfied it will be the Saudi-backed consortium controlling the club, not the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and that their owners and directors' tests on transparency and a clean financial plan have been met.
TV, thanks for all the wonderful support.
Cheers, Amanda.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for your
much.
commitment, Amanda.
Oh, no, well, it was all about you guys now. It's all about you.
Premier League football is the best in the world. And Newcastle United is the best team in the world. And we want to see it get those trophies, obviously, at top of the Premier League in Europe. But to get trophies, it means investment, patience, time. And we want everybody just to work with us to build the club to what it needs to be.
Promises have been made about who will be involved, but the Saudi Arabian Investment Fund is overseen by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man the United States accused of approving the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
It is a real shame for the Newcastle and for the British English football that they have now the football club owned by a person who responsible the murder of Jamal.
On Tyneside, they do care where the money comes from and who owns their club. But they needed change, and the Saudi-backed consortium were the only ones offering to deliver it. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Newcastle.
Let's see how the weather is looking on this Friday as we head into the weekend. Pleased to report it's going to be quite warm over the next few days, but the north and the west will have a little rain. Today, starting very mild for October, perhaps close to record-breaking for Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland. The morning's low cloud and fog over England and Wales will lift to leave plenty of sunshine, but the south east, for its part, will remain dull. The odd light shower possible there. Elsewhere, rather cloudy with outbreaks of rain heavy in places. It will be warm for many and breezy in the west. Central and southern England will have a cloudier afternoon, whereas southern and eastern Scotland, the east of Ireland and south east England should turn drier and brighter. Some very good news this morning. We've been reporting here on Sky News how Andy Murray had lost his trainers, but also his wedding ring, which he attaches to them whenever he plays. Well, the former Wimbledon and Olympic champion was in the bad books after those shoes and the ring went missing in California when he left them outside. But after Andy appealed for help on social media, both his trainers and the ring were returned to him, and he posted the smelly moment on social media.
A huge thanks for all the messages and also to everyone for sharing the story about the shoes and the wedding ring. Had to make a few calls today and chat to the security at the hotel and everything, and little update for everyone. Would you believe it? Oh, they still absolutely stink, but the shoes are back, the wedding ring is back, and I'm back in the good books. Let's go!
Lucky boy, Andy. Lucky boy. Still to come on the programme this morning, the fears that a row over fishing rights between France and the UK could lead to electricity supplies being cut off. We'll be speaking to a French MEP next.
The best innovation comes when there is a need and a problem to solve. Rarely have we faced a more testing time. Join us live from Yorkshire for the first in a series of Sky News in-person events, where we will explore how to fire up UK business. Watch thought-provoking discussions with Sky News experts on building a stronger and greener economy. Think big with us. Big ideas live on Sky News.
Welcome back. Senior health officials are warning that there could be a surge in the number of flu cases this winter, with predictions that hospital admissions could double compared to a normal year. A little earlier, the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, called on people to get vaccinated.
It's extremely important that people get their flu vaccination. In previous years, we will have heard these messages pre-COVID, and some people have thought, well, you know, I'm usually fine with these things. This year is different, as your report suggested. You've had people not building up any immunity because last year we were all split apart so much because of COVID. And then obviously the twin threats of both COVID and flu means that this year getting your flu jab, if you're in any one of the many different categories you showed there, all over 50s, vulnerable people, people who live with vulnerable people, just go and get the flu jab done. You can probably get it at the same time or similar time to doing the booster jab for people for COVID as well.
I also spoke to the Transport Secretary about the changing travel rules. With so many countries being taken off the red list, I asked Grant Shapps whether a decision on relaxing the PCR test rule in time for half-term would be taken soon.
In the coming days, we know when obviously the half term's coming up, and my advice to people would be just to hold off. You will need to book make sure that you've got a lateral flow test booked, and you'll put the reference number on your passenger locator form.
Ali Fortescue joins me in the studio. Morning, Ali. What did you make of the Transport Secretary?
Well, I thought it was interesting to him saying that in the coming days we're going to get an announcement on PCR tests for travel, because that's really important for families. That's been one of the big questions. When will they scrap the plan? The rules at the moment are that you have to get one of those expensive PCR tests on day 2 after coming back. There's lots of pressure from families and from the travel sector for that to be scrapped in time for half term, which isn't far away. At most schools on the 22nd of October. He said that's going to happen in the coming days, but he also said my advice would be just to hold off. So I think a bit of confusion still around that. And we heard him there too talking about the flu vaccines this winter. Obviously, that's going to be an enormous logistical challenge for the government, getting everyone jabbed, not just for COVID, but for flu as well. We know that having both viruses at the same time really increases your risk of having serious symptoms or of dying. So I thought he sounded quite optimistic, perhaps not taking it as seriously as some would like him to. He said the pressure on the health service is there every single year, and that we're in a different position now because so many people have been vaccinated for COVID.
Ali, more from you throughout the show. For now, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's return to those fears that a row over fishing rights between France and the UK could lead to electricity supplies from across the Channel being cut off. French fishermen are calling for better access to UK waters. Pleased to say that joining us now is French MEP Pierre Carleskind, chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Fisheries. Monsieur Carleskind, good to see you this morning. For viewers on this side of the Channel who might not be as closely involved in this dispute as you and your colleagues, just explain the nature of the dispute between the UK and France at the moment.
Oh, the nature. Good morning first, and happy to be with you this morning. The nature of the dispute is simple. In fact, we are implementing the biggest ever cooperation agreement between EU and any other country. And this is the same for UK, and specifically on the fishery issue. We have negotiated during the years after the decision of Brexit. And what is in the agreement is that we share the waters, the UK waters and the EU waters. So our fishermen can come to UK waters and your fishermen can come to EU waters. But to access a specific zone, the territorial waters, they need licenses. And we are just asking the application, the perfect application of the treaty, meaning that we are asking to the UK government and to the Jersey government to give the licenses as it is said and written in the treaty. And right now we're still waiting 9 months after the conclusion of the Brexit. We're still waiting for dozens of these licenses. So fishermen, some French fishermen can't do their activity anymore.
Yeah, just in terms of the numbers, I think the UK announced last month just 12 of the 47 applications it had received from French small boats had been granted. The Jersey government said that of 170 licence applications, 75 had been rejected. So it's your contention that the British government, the authorities on Jersey, are doing this as part of the negotiations?
Yeah, what we are waiting is to, we have been collecting data, and when I say we, it's the French administration mostly, and the European Commission has given the data, the position data of these vessels, because you have to prove, and this is normal, that fishery occurred in the last years. I mean, we are not going to send new boats fishing in the territorial waters of UK because we don't want to, and this is the agreement. But we gave the data showing that these ships, these boats, are used to have fishing activity in these waters. So we've worked seriously. And what I understand is that the UK administration, not at the political level, they just don't understand why at political level asks them more data, more precision. I'm afraid that this is a way for Boris Johnson to divert from the current issue related to Brexit. But one thing is clear, is that nobody will have a better life in the UK if you try to make life of the fishermen harder in France. This doesn't work like that. And this is really not useful to try to give troubles to French fishermen to get, I don't know why. I don't understand what Boris Johnson is trying to do, except
sorry to interrupt, Mr. Calliskin, but some would say by way of counter that the proportionality of the French response is off the scale. To threaten to cut off energy supplies, in regards to a dispute over fishing, seems, well, at the very least, somewhat disproportionate.
Yeah, well, first of all, no electricity has been cut so far. So you still have the electricity and no retaliation.
It's been threatened more than once now.
There are threats, but you have to understand that 9 months later, some fishermen haven't been fishing during these last 9 months. So some of them are a bit nervous. You have to understand that. And from the French part, when we see that the official position of France and from Europe is insulted by the behavior of the UK government. Once more, we're not fighting against the United Kingdom. This is a great country, and we fully understand that you are a sovereign country. But we just do not accept that the UK government acts like that. So there are threats, but right now we haven't still officially published any potential retaliation measures. These measures, they are written in the agreement. So we will activate them if we do not succeed in discussing seriously and politically and frankly with the UK government. So far, there is nothing that is applied. There is tension in the air. You have to understand that. But we have to figure out what we can do to have the treaty fully and correctly and frankly implemented.
Pierre Calliskin, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Now, NHS staff say they're under as much pressure now as they were during the peak of the COVID pandemic. The organisation, NHS Charities Together, say that most staff believe the strain on services will continue for years. Sky's Betty Cottrell has been taking a look.
Coronavirus was the hardest thing many NHS workers had ever faced. But they knew the backlog of non-COVID patients would be another battle, one they're now facing. This unrelenting workload and the scenes inside hospitals during the pandemic have taken their toll.
The number of patients, how sick they were, the fact that they're all fighting for breath and they're all just there in front of you. It's really difficult being there in person. It's the same everywhere, so a lot of my colleagues have struggled to process and, like you said, go through things. And emotionally it's very difficult.
And they're worried about what's to come. 81% of NHS staff say they are as concerned about pressures on the service now as they were at the peak of the pandemic. And a huge 96% think the strain on hospitals and other medical providers will continue for years. And frontline workers are suffering. 2/3 have experienced mental health problems since the start of last year, including anxiety and depression. Many are only able to get therapy because of donations to charities.
It's really vitally important that we continue to be there for our staff and through the NHS in the long term, because COVID has worsened every challenge there is within the NHS has been impacted and worsened by COVID.
Doctors and nurses were hailed as heroes for the stress and sadness they endured. But as the rest of society gets back to normal, the NHS is still overwhelmed. And as winter approaches and waiting lists grow, staff are trying to treat as many patients as possible. But at what personal cost? Becky Cottrell, Sky News.
Time for a look at the sport. Here's Hannah.
Record breakers. Me too. World's slowest dog.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by the Vitality Running World Cup.
Andy, tell us a little bit about what you guys do here and how you're trying to make heading the ball safer for everybody.
So we've developed a training platform designed to help players learn how to head the ball in a step-by-step process, designed by UEFA Pro coaches, UEFA A licensed coaches, all of the steps that you should take to safely head the ball.
The system itself, if you're using it in training, you're doing two things really. One, you're reducing the number of impacts, and the other one is because of the realism of the system, you're still able to increase the skill level that the players develop.
What we're trying to say is if there's 10 headers a week that you're allowed to do now, we can help maybe give you 200 a week.
How mobile can you be? Do you need to be in your house?
It's totally wireless. You can use it anywhere, like your bedroom, you can use it out in the garden, or you can use it in a living room, and that's going to be teaching you how to head a ball better. You said before that you weren't great at it, so by the end of the day we'll have you walking out and scoring worldies.
If you can smooth out this 50p head.
We'll see what we can do.
Where am I here, by the way?
This is just our training centre. We're not going to replace anything. We're there to complement what's happening at training grounds already. All you've got to do is the ball's going to come out of that circle and you've got to head it straight back in. So it's like infinite head tennis.
Oh.
There you go. Feel free to move around, plant your feet again if you want to. Just get comfortable and just get used to heading the ball.
Recent research has come out that shows that players are more likely to suffer with conditions like dementia, about 3.5 times more likely we're seeing versus the general population. Now that's being linked to heading the ball, so that's obviously an issue from a player welfare point of view, and it's something that authorities are starting to take very seriously.
If you put power in it, it'll come out back at you faster. If it spins, it'll challenge you a bit harder as well, so it's trying to get you to put the ball right down the middle of that circle. Right.
People have been looking into this for about 20 years. Now, the last 10 years, the research has really started to ramp up, and we're seeing real-life stories now with the likes of Dennis Law and Tony McDermott. There's that piece around player welfare that the authorities just have to take seriously. They have to look at mitigation strategies, trying to reduce heading, probably in training, which is where we can control it much more, is probably a sensible place to start.
I've not counted how many you've done in this, but I'm pretty certain there's a lot more than you would do in an average training session straight away.
Yeah, I'm a lot better than I would be in an average training session as well.
Well, there you go. That's because we're basically planting you in the right formation, delivering the ball right to your head.
Yeah.
21 in a row, which is pretty good. Notice the trajectories are altering. You have to move your body a lot more now.
I'm making lots of...
Morning. I'll join later.
Hannah, thanks very much indeed. Coming up after the break, I'm going to be hearing from the environmental group WWF, who claim the UK is on course to miss its target of net zero emissions by 2050. Find out why next.
It's been an incredible journey having a public-private partnership, working together with funders, with the governments and the ministries of health in South Africa, Eswatini and Mozambique. We set out on a journey to eliminate malaria in our region, and for the last 6 years have been quite successful in been able to bring down the number of cases as well as the number of deaths within the region. And we're not far away from elimination. So it's quite an exciting time for us. It's a absolute historic announcement. The world has been waiting for the first announcement of a malaria vaccine. And this announcement of the GSK RTSS malaria vaccine is particularly important. It allows us to add an additional tool into the arsenal that we have, particularly at a time when malaria progress has plateaued since 2015. Of course, even before the pandemic, we were behind the curve with our ambitious goals for 2030. So bringing on a new tool adds new energy, new vigor for us to get over the line as planned. We need to put that into context. We certainly believe it has the potential to save tens of thousands of children, both from cases and death per year. But the context is that it's got to be used in combination with the existing tools that we have. And that's a very important fact to consider. It has to be used both with the vector tools, so that is the tools we use against the mosquito, so our bed nets or our indoor residual spraying program. And it's also got to be done in conjunction with diagnostics and therapeutics. So ensuring that the children have access to healthcare is part of the package that the vaccine works very well with.
Cercando as áreas, limpando as áreas e progressivamente avançando com os plantios. Isso daqui é uma sentença de morte para os manguezais.
Does anyone know which particular parts of your body can be damaged by air pollution?
There'll be a very mild start to Friday with some rain in the north and west. England and Wales will see early low cloud and fog lifting to leave plenty of warm afternoon sunshine. But parts of the south will stay dull. The odd shower is possible. Elsewhere, it's going to be rather cloudy with outbreaks of rain, heavy in places. The southwesterly flow will bring clean air from the Atlantic, so the air pollution index, where 1 means low pollution and 10 means very high, will stay low everywhere.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, environmentalists say the government is unlikely to meet its commitment to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. The WWF say the target will be missed unless tougher legislation is imposed on big business. Joining now to discuss, Katie White from the WWF. Katie, I do hope you're well. Good to see you this morning. Just explain, given that we're the best part of 3 decades away from the 2050 date, why we can say that we're not currently on track for it.
Well, the government has got an ambitious target that will reduce our emissions by 2/3 by 2035. And businesses are a core part of that. So we've taken a look at the biggest businesses in the UK, and we've disappointingly found that only 19% have got a plan to reach net zero. Now, more of them have got a target, and that's welcome that we've got a target. But obviously, what's really important is that you've got a plan to meet that target. And as I say, only 19% have made that plan, and we can see that plan. So what we're calling for is the government to stop the gap and not expect that they're going to get these emissions reductions unless we have legislation for plans and mandatory transition plans.
Why then do you think 4 out of 5 FTSE 100 companies are proving so reluctant to come up with a concrete and detailed action plan? You'd have thought that even just for reasons of corporate social responsibility and with all the eyes on green issues these days, that it might be an idea to put something down on paper.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the run-up to the landmark COP conference that we've got coming up in Glasgow in only a few weeks' time, we've got businesses falling over themselves to talk about net zero. And as I say, there is a lot of commitments out there. But commitments are one thing, a plan is a very different thing. You know, I compare it a bit like to a pizza box. There's calories on a pizza, but it doesn't mean to say you're going to stop eating it or lose weight. A weight management plan is a very different proposition. And so whilst we do welcome the companies that have come forward with net zero commitments, there are over a quarter left in the FTSE who haven't, and we'd urge them to come forward with commitments. We're also saying we need that plan. A government needs to step in. The window for voluntary action has gone. We all know that. The science is terrifying. We've all got to step up now and make sure we're on that trajectory towards net zero with credible plans alongside those credible commitments.
Katie, do you think it's likely, however, that you can persuade this government, given its political inclinations, to legislate, to force companies into doing this, particularly when, you know, other G7 nations, well, certainly not all G7 nations are doing what you're asking for?
Well, I think, to be fair, the government is saying this is their big issue. So if this is their big issue and they're putting a plan on the table and they want everybody to come on board and support them doing that, they need to set the criteria in place. And so we need legislation to make sure there's a level playing field. And actually, some of those leading businesses are saying, please do it, because at the moment, we're all in this sort of no man's land with various commitments of different ambition levels. And actually, we all want to move together. If we move together, you know, not only is that good for the climate, but it could be really good for the UK. There's a lot of business opportunities for those who go first and go fastest.
Yeah, and certainly that's something that Boris Johnson particularly has been banging on about over the past couple of years since he became Prime Minister. I just wonder then, what do you need to hear from the leaders at the COP26 summit as regards kind of, you know, the private sector to kind of get us towards that 2050 target?
So first of all, I want to hear from the government. I really want to hear from the government, and it has to be from the top of government, whether that's the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, or the Business Secretary, saying we are going to be introducing legislation for mandatory plans. They've said already it's going to be mandatory for these big companies to say what they're emitting. These big companies punch above their weight in terms of profit and in terms of carbon emissions. And so they've said they want to make sure they've got their calories on the pack, so to speak. But what we're saying is they have to say it's mandatory for them to have a plan to make sure that they all know the direction of travel, and they have to come up with some credible action to match up with those commitments. We've seen lots of this, you know, we see in shop windows people talking about their net zero commitment. We see it on packs. But what actually matters is the reduction in carbon emissions, because the planet isn't bothered about the PR. The planet is bothered about the reductions in emissions. So we want the government to come forward and do that. And we welcome more companies to come forward with their commitments, but most importantly, those plans to follow through.
Katie, aside from those comments about pizza, which I felt were directed straight at me, I was wondering whether you were watching me pig out last night. Thanks very much for joining us, Katie White from the WWF.
Deal.